Hi everybody, thanks again for joining us tonight and tuning in to our second night of the witch trials. I hope you're all enjoying what we've done so far and continue to join the rest of the week. I'm going to be talking about the North Berwick witch trials tonight, which is quite interesting. I'm a wee bit of a history geek, so I have been writing, so I do apologise if I bored you, but I'll do my best.
Good stuff, and you'll hardly be hearing my voice tonight, which will be a relief probably, because you're probably scunnered listening to my voice. But hey, Gillian, anyway, Doc, thanks for coming in. I'm glad you've been swatting up, Gillian. If you get any questions, then feel free to pop them into the chat, and Sam and myself will do our best to answer them. We're no guarantee we're going to answer them because there's tons and tons of stuff on all the witch trials, but, you know, we will do our best. So it's Sam's live tonight, so I'm going to get back to her and she can fire away.
And I do apologise for not welcoming anybody, but I can't see the chat. And if I do see the chat, I'll probably kick myself off. So I am being ignorant, all right. So, the North Berwick witch trials. The town of North Berwick hugs the coast of East Lothian, just to the east of Edinburgh. It's a small, sleepy fishing town, and yet has several surprising claims to fame. The Isle of Phaedra, which was the inspiration for Treasure Island, and is also home to Bash Rock, a famous seabird nature reserve. But most commonly and famously, it was the home to one of the most brutal and horrific witch trials ever seen in Scotland. During the reign of James VI, somewhere between 70 to 200 so-called witches were put on trial, tortured and even executed, from the town of North Berwick and surrounding area alone. The exact number is not known, and neither is the proportion of those arrested who were actually executed. The consensus is that a large number were horrifically tortured, and the reason behind it was King James VI. James was travelling to Denmark to collect his new bride, Anne, in 1589, and during the crossing, the storms were so severe that he was forced to turn back multiple times. James became convinced this was the work of witches from North Berwick who were intent on his ruin. So, through reading and through researching, what I found out is that Anne herself had tried to come across the water to Scotland, but couldn't, and had to keep turning back. And then James got sick of waiting and decided to go one better and try and go himself. He managed to get across there, but then while trying to come back to Scotland from Denmark, this is when they came into all the trouble again. And this is when he started to believe that there was people out to get him and trying to kill him. There was talk at this time that one of the assumed witches had sailed into the Firth of Forth on a sieve to summon the storm. And according to this apparently proved her guilt as not only a witch, but a would-be regicide, which is the action of killing a king. It seems a wee bit far-fetched, somebody actually trying to get into the sea in a sieve, considering it's got holes in it, so to say. A bit strange. But I suppose that was a way to look at the magic, isn't it? That's to do with the magic of witches. James's hatred and obsession of witches and witchcraft grew and became well known, and it was no accident that Shakespeare wrote the witches into his play Macbeth. It was also clear James had a strong disdain for witches, and this spread countrywide, and throughout his life he continued to be fascinated by the dark arts, and Scotland was where he began his crusade against the supposed demonology.
Gillian, you got a comment, Sam, I'll put up, it was largely lowland women who had not much worth.
It tended to be people that were slightly poor or slightly more desolate and non-educated, as they called them. And if they tended to have like a feeling of like being able to heal or any sort of preference to do with herbs or medicine, they were deemed witches, because people of their stature shouldn't have an education. That's how they were looked at, basically, that because they were the lower realm sort of thing, then they shouldn't possess these powers to be able to heal.
Aye, basically they're all looked down on. Do you know what I mean? It was the same for decades and decades that if you were poor or nobody wanted to know you, and you were
nothing, weren't you?
nothing. You know.
And if you try to prove your worth, it was always, well, how did they get that? How did they manage to do this? How did they manage to do that?
Yeah, Andy's got a comment for you, though.
Basically, so Andy, so it was the women who were different according to the male species on that time. Yes, there always seemed to be something wrong with the women. It was never a man. So you've got a wee point there. It was never ever a man. At that time, Scotland itself saw about 4,000 people burned alive at the stake for witchcraft, which was an enormous number relative to the size and population of that time. So if you think about that in this day and age, it would be like dropping a stone in an ocean, because there's that much. But back then, it wasn't as occupied, so it would wipe out a fair bit.
There's no
like the area.
Jillian's got another comment for you. The only Scottish witches were tortured via a use of prickling. It wasn't used anywhere else.
That's right. Scotland seemed to have their own tortures and their way of dealing with it. And I think they just seemed to make it up as they went along. Well, this doesn't work, so we'll try this. But I'll get into some torture methods in a little while. I've actually got some torture methods written down, which was remotely used in Scotland, along with other places, but it seemed to be a Scottish running theme.
But don't forget, in the Witchcraft Act of 1563 that Parliament passed, the same year Scotland passed its own Witchcraft Act, and that differed from the English one. Scotland was more brutal. Scotland Witchcraft Act allowed the use of torture, and it also included anyone who even spoke to a suspected witch was still guilty of the capital crime. Whereas England, they never done it. They didn't allow torture, whereas Scotland did. So that was there's two the same act, but one was more brutal than the other.
Completely different. It was like the same. If I was a witch, then they would go to my family and look for other witches in the family, because they didn't see it as an isolated occurrence. It's like you came from a witch comes from a witch, that sort of thing. So it's like followed on for some reason. I think they must have thought it was like hereditary or anything like that, just so that if you're a witch, then your mum must have been a witch, or your sister's a witch, or It's crazy how people think. It's really crazy.
Andy saying, no, sorry, I mean different, as in not the normal, as in educated and money, etc.
That's true. I think it was a case that the women back then were to be homemakers. It was the men in the male species at that time that was like the breadwinner. The women were there basically to like look after the children and be ladies in waiting for like the courts and things like that. So I think it was kind of a case of women were kept in quite a fair bit. And that's why they were deemed as that slightly bit more strange if they did get out and about and learn things, because it was not known at that time. The thing is with the North Berwick witch trials as well was the bizarre nature of accusations and the terrible forms of torture used to extract confessions. It was quite harsh, some of them. Really harsh. And the fact that James would have been so convinced that the storm had scuppered his plans and had been conjured up by a Scottish woman is incredibly hard to believe. In my opinion, it's like, how can a wee old woman sitting on the edge of a seafront come out and say one day, I'm going to set a storm up in that sea and kill the king?
But that's how paranoid he was. That's how deep his hatred was. Maybe not just a woman, but the whole, that and his fear as well. Hi, BB, buddy, thanks for coming in. I hope you're well. Shelley's here as well, I forgot to say. Angelina as well, she came in. Andy, as we know, is in, Jillian. But that's how deep his paranoia must have went, and his actual fear of witchcraft, you know, and anything connected to it. That he was just paranoid, basically, when the storm came. He was like, you know, this is a work of Satan or whoever. That's
like an obsession. I think it was like an obsession in the end as well, because he was continually thinking the route to get me. So he believed it.
Aye, it's just paranoia.
Because around 70 individuals, mostly women, were rounded up, tortured and put on trial. There was a church on the green called St Andrew's Kirk, and this is where it is said the witches held their covens to dance and summon the devil. It was deemed the perfect place to summon a storm, as it was on the seafront, and it's also said that some of the accused were taken back to the kirk to be tried and tortured. Being deemed a witch was very simple. You could be accused simply by having red hair or for having an unusual devil mark, otherwise known as a birthmark, or for being left-handed. And traditionally, older women and those who worked with herbs and medicine and midwives were targeted.
Gillian says that was for a guilty witch, but I'm not sure what you mean. What was for a guilty witch? I don't know, but Andy's made a comment there. Paranoia back in those days was ridiculous. Folk must have been worried about everything they do. A farmer would sow his fields, his wife must have been terrified in case the crops didn't grow.
That's it. Crops didn't grow, it's witchcraft, it's black magic.
There's Forrest is in, right? Forrest all. Justin's in as well.
That's right. Any mark on your body which was seen as a devil mark, that's right.
Carry on, Doc. I'm just putting the comments up as they're coming along.
Among the witches accused of trying to kill James was Gayley Duncan. She was a young Scottish maidservant, and she was suspected of witchcraft by her employer, David Seaton, in 1590, as she was uneducated but required a reputation as a healer, leading him to believe that witchcraft was involved. When she was first questioned in November 1590, she was very unresponsive with her answers. She was then tortured using pillywinks, which is like a device that they put their fingers and their toes into and crush them, basically till they confess, and by tightening and twisting a rope around her head. And only after her tormentors claimed to have found the devil's mark on her neck after shaving all her hair off did she finally confess to being a witch. But after if somebody was crushing your fingers, I think you would just say anything, wouldn't you?
With torture, you would just, give up. You would, there's only so much you can take. But Gillian's made a good point, That's me hung then. I've red hair and a birthmark in the shape of a dog's head, which is true. Gillian lived back in the times. I dare say the finger
probably
might be, somebody might have thought, she's a bit sus.
It's very strange, isn't it? Just how
you did get the odd witch you did get the odd person who, as we said last night, would confess to being a witch before they were tortured.
Aye, to stop the torture.
Aye, because they knew, once you were accused, that was it. You were done for. So rather than
getting it, didn't you?
Right. Rather than get through all the torture, they would just say, you know what, I'm a witch, just hang me, because I knew there anyway.
Aye. But Gayley was incarcerated between November 1590 and May 1591, and over a period of time, she preceded the many others involved with witchcraft. She was convicted on the 4th of December 1591 and was executed on Castle Hill in Edinburgh by burning at the stake. She named quite a few people, even like high up people, high up people in Edinburgh. She worked for David Seaton, and I think she'd accused David Seaton's sister-in-law of being a witch. And obviously there was the Agnes Samson, who I'm going to talk about next. She was one of the main conspirators that she named. There's also a gentleman as well, I think it was Dr. Phileas, I think he was called. He was classed as a wizard, but for some reason he was the only one that didn't get executed. All the women did, but he didn't.
You see, back then as well, so, obviously, as you said earlier on, it was kind of the lower class that were more prone to being accused of witchcraft. But I think back then this would have gave, obviously, people in, high society that heard about witchcraft and maybe wanted to dabble in it. And they, in their opinion, that they would never be suspected because of who they were. Because of Aye. And I dare say that did go on.
It's crazy.
The fear of the known would make me confess if you knew you were going to be tortured for days or killed quickly. The only options I know I would choose, hard as it would be.
Me too.
Exactly, Andy. Rather than go through the rack or, the pricking or whatever, you say, okay, just burn me the noon, get it over.
Even the guttering when they half strangle you, Why would you want to be half strangled and then put on a stake to be burnt? I would rather be away.
Aye. That's they done that because it just basically prolonged the execution, but then you did get the odd execution where, friends, if they had money, would pay the executioner to strangle them,
over and done with.
Kill them. So they were actually dead. As I said last night, they were dead before the fire was lit.
But I found Agnes Samson very, very... I quite enjoyed researching her for author of being like a witch and things. She was quite a good person to research. There's quite a lot of information on her as well. She was one of the people named by Gayley Duncan as one of her conspirators. She was deemed a cunning and known as a healer and midwife, and she had apparently been coached in some of the black arts by her father, as in making predictions, and some of her attempts at healing were not always productive. So she'd try and heal somebody and it went the wrong way and they'd die, and it was all to do with if the weather was a certain way, then this person wouldn't survive, whereas really she just messed up. But she blamed it on like the earth and the wind and the everything like that. So, and on early interrogation, Agnes fleetingly touched on conjuring poor weather at sea to thwart the king's attempt to bring his bride home. She also described being involved in a devil's convention at Barrick 2 years earlier, where male and female witches gathered at North Berwick Kirk in Halloween 1590 and basically raised the devil. So this was like 2 years prior to the actual carry on with James in the sea. She admitted being at a devil's convention. She stated the devil was present and dressed in a black robe and hat and was checking off names on a register. They then paid homage to the devil by performing an obscene kiss, which was basically a kiss on the butt cheek. That's what they had to do. Kisses his bum cheek.
Right.
And then they all danced and were entertained for the rest of the night.
Ghost Witches was saying witch cakes are a way of finding out whether someone has been cursed by a witch, and they're afflicted with mix of urine into rye flour made into a cake, fed to a dog, and as they were in league with the devil, if the dog showed the same symptoms, there's a witch. Sounds quite disgusting. It's interesting, I think it's quite disgusting.
It is interesting. Agnes also confessed to the excavation of bodies for use in magical practice. The powders she used were the joints of the corpses. She participated in the opening of 3 graves and also removing finger joints, the nose and toes from corpses. They were then tied to limbs of dead cats and thrown in the sea to conjure a storm. That's a bit...
This is what she was accused of?
She confessed to this. She confessed to the opening of 3 graves and removing fingers, noses and toes of corpses and tying them to the legs and limbs of dead cats and flinging them in the sea to conjure up a spirit. She also stated that the devil gave them a wax doll of King James VI. So she stated that as well, that he gave them a wax mould of King James VI to create havoc, basically.
So possibly she was, she maybe some kind of mental illness. Or I'm not saying she did, I mean...
You would never know.
She
was elderly.
Well, I mean, it could have been dementia or, whatever. At the time, she claimed to have met the devil in a long black cloak on.
Aye.
You see, that's very similar to the story of the card game at, I think it's Clamus Castle. Remember the card game? There's these people claim to have played a card game with someone who says he was the devil and he'd made a deal with him, but it was an actual figure in a long black cloak. And my theory is that obviously it wasn't the devil himself, but back then people were so naive and they believed pretty much, everything.
Aye, what everybody said.
Claiming to be the devil, and a lot, and just putting a long black cloak. To me, that would make sense. I might be wrong. I don't know, but I just think that
there becomes a pattern, like throughout it. Like it's like the same sort of, like the same get-up, like the long black coat, the hat, the devil. But the funny thing was with Agnes, though, that for a while she wasn't actually detained, and she remained at liberty until after Halloween. And by that November, she was incarcerated at the toll booth at Haddington, awaiting the outcome. So she got to roam free for a good wee while before they actually incarcerated her.
Right. Hey, Sarah. Sarah's finally turned up. We've been going for 21 minutes. She's finally turned up. But we'll say nothing about that.
No.
That's quite unusual, but because usually once you were accused, then
you were taken away.
But then there's a case we spoke last night, the case of Isabel Long, who it was for about 4 years. There was a lot of allegations made against her about witchcraft, but it wasn't until 1629, I think it was, that a warrant was actually issued for her arrest, and she was tried for witch then. And her husband, there was 45 witnesses against her, including her husband. So she kind of ran free. It's not really clear why, but she kind of ran free for 4 or 5 years doing, bits and pieces. And then they decided to arrest her. Why? Who knows?
You'd think if they were a witch and they were deemed a witch, then they would have just arrested them like they'd done with everybody else. But for some reason, she got to remain at liberty for a good few months. Her first statement made in December time, around the 4th or 5th, was a transcript of her answers to specific questions put to her. She was put to trial on the 27th of January 1951 and confessed to 58 out of the 102 accusations against her. So she was up on a lot of charges. She didn't have a leg to stand on, the woman, to be fair. She was declared guilty and was transported to Castle Hill, Edinburgh, and the following day was executed. She was strangled and her body burnt. But for the fact that she's admitted to 58 of the charges out of the 102, that's quite vast. That's a lot of charges.
It's quite a lot. I think even if she admitted to 2 of them, she would have ended up in Castle Hill anyway.
Aye, guaranteed. But that's quite, for anybody, 58's quite a lot.
She'd been a busy woman.
I think so. Rather her than me. Some of the torture methods that were used at the time included the breast stripper, a device that did exactly how it sounded. That makes me cringe. It consisted of 4-pronged levers that would encase the breast of the accused and then tear it from her chest with a considerable amount of trauma. Of the pain of that alone.
You don't even want to, obviously I'm not a woman, I don't have the name, but even the thought of it.
Aye, that would make you confess before. It would make me confess before it, that's for sure.
I don't even know why that would come under torture, because, obviously I'm not a doctor, but I would imagine getting them ripped off would be enough to kill you.
You would think so. You'd think you'd bleed out, but I don't know. I really don't know. It's quite... I don't know.
I know back in, a couple of past wars and whatever, they did actually cut the breasts off the mothers to stop them feeding their young. And the mothers, they never died through it. So it's... But either way, it's pretty gruesome. Angelina's saying she didn't stand a chance.
She's right.
She didn't stand a chance. She was more or less just kaput.
It's basically...
Talk tonight, and I'm gabbing away, so I'm going to shut up, like you carry on.
We're fine, we're just talking amongst each other. Another device used on witches either tried or awaiting trial was the Scold's Bridle, which was a metal device that would fit around the head, and it had a metal protrusion that went into the mouth, making it impossible to talk. Now, this wasn't only used on witches. Husbands actually used this on their significant others if they spoke too much. So that actually it was used in like everyday sort of scenarios. It wasn't just used on like a so-called witch or whatever. It's like you could be talking too much and they'd say, "Here, put that on." But it was like iron all the way around, and then it had the metal iron bit, like the metal protrusion that went right in and like held your tongue down and stuff. It was quite gruesome.
But then that again shows you how women were looked upon back then. I mean, you imagine doing that in this day and age, that they found that acceptable back then. You know,
never get away with it now.
You know, so that really does show you how women were looked down on way back then. Tracy Milligan's in. Sorry, Tracy, I just seen your name there, Doll. A couple of comments. The thought of that gives me the fear. The fear.
You're right, Tracy. It's absolutely horrendous. I would be cocking myself. I'd be like,
I don't know how women never die. Well, you see, I'm not a doctor, but I would imagine that would be enough to, you know, kill them. But
I don't know.
Who knows?
Well, I don't know. Obviously, without getting into anything like that, but you can live without one. So
I know you can live without them, but you know, obviously it's done, you know, surgically. But to have them ripped off your body, do you know what I mean?
Aye, it's quite
horrific. To use devices where that is pure evil to us on someone that might have committed an offence or not. Exactly when it is.
That would be you, Snicker.
I was going to say something, but I'm not going to say it loud. I don't think many women did have a choice, but then again, you know, it all goes back to how women were treated. To say hello to Tayami and Wilson, Sarah just asked me. Say hello to Tayami, and so hello Tayami and
hi
Wilson.
Tayami.
There's Kirsty knows of a presence and hope I stand Wentworth where she's from, the witch is known to attack paranormal
investigators. Ooh, that would be interesting. What does she do to them, Andy? What kind of attack does she do? Does she fling things? What does she do? That'd be quite interesting.
Andy and Kirsty are on next Monday, I think, buddy. You're on. I think it's Monday or Tuesday. Monday, I think it's Monday.
Before I carry on, can I just ask people in the chat, what's your thoughts on a witch? See, when you hear the word witch, what do you automatically think of? Because me, when I first used to hear the words a witch, I used to think it'd be like the witch out of Hansel and Gretel with the big green nose and the big wart on the nose and things like that. So what's your thoughts? What was your perception of a witch when you first heard the word witch?
Mind you, look at all the war wounds that people have survived.
Aye, that's true.
I remember when I was a kid, I must have been about 8 or 9 years old, and there was a field we weren't allowed to go in. It was just a normal field, but it was this big, huge boulder, and all your friends used to say it was a witch's grave. There was a witch buried under there. Turned out it was just a boulder lying in the grass, you know, but we believed there was an actual witch under there. Andy's saying scratches and more, so he talked about Kirsty getting attacked there. And who even thinks of creating these devices? That's another good point, Angelina.
It's like medieval, isn't it? It's like medieval. It's like the man in the iron mask, that sort of thing.
You think, how would they come up?
Quite medieval, like torturous, isn't it? Like the jousting and things, and reminds me of like suits of armour and things like that, because it's all like the metal and the iron.
Mm-hmm.
But
There's Sarah's got a wee woman sitting in a house with loads of cats.
Sarah, that's you.
But then why is a witch, here's a question for any witches in the chat. Why is a cat always associated with a witch?
Aye.
Do you know what I mean?
Why not a bird? Aye, why not a bird? Or
But I think there's some witches being associated with a crow or something, or a raven, something like that. Shelley saying, same as you, Sam, when I was a child, old woman with gloves, wigs and that. Wasn't that?
Because Halloween, it's like Halloween when, what do you want to dress up as? A witch. And it was always a big pointy nose with the big long body fingers and stuff. It was never like when you see like white witches and your Wiccans and everything like that. They're so different to what they're portrayed to be.
Well, that's it. The old days, the old hag wandering through the woods, living in a wee cottage and that. But now, you've got beautiful witches kind of thing. So there's Penny saying, witches.
That's right, Penny.
Women that didn't have a man controlling that would offend so many people.
It would back then. It would have definitely, because the men were in power, as I said.
And those witches can have any animal as a familiar. There you go.
It just always seems to be a witch and a cat, doesn't it?
Well, when I was growing up, I was always a cat, the witch with a cat sitting at the end of a broomstick, stuff like that. Hi, Kirsty, thanks for coming in, doll. That's Andy's wife. Kirsty's in. When I first heard the word, it was used to instill fear. Now I have a very different view using what nature gives us, herbs, etc. But she's right. I think when you're younger and somebody says witch, it automatically just makes you, Satan, black magic, all that kind of stuff. Wasn't there a witch that cursed Alton Towers?
I don't know.
No idea, though. No idea. That's a good girl. I'll make a note in my legendary pad. And I was talking
the trusted pad.
So I'll look that up. Hi, Through the Veil. Hope you're good, dog. Getting on your feet.
Ghost Witches as well, saying Boscastle Witchcraft Museum allow any familiar to go in with you, and she took her old dog in. That's quite good.
Witches are good people.
I don't doubt that for a second. It's all about your nature and your herbs and everything, isn't it? It's all like the lay of the land sort of thing. It's all natural.
Exactly. So there's Through the Veils came in. I hope you're keeping well, Doc. We'll catch up, so get you on for a catch up. Been a wee while since we had a wee chit chat. So give my best to Underworld as well. Hope he's doing well. Alton Towers and Rotherham to be investigated. That'll only get added on the list, Andy. The list is growing longer, isn't it, Sam?
Oh, it is. Very, very long. We're running out of space in that pad.
We're going to be away for about 6 months. We'll not see Kilmarnock for 6 months. I mean, they'll build new houses and that. So by the time we get back,
it'll be a ghost town.
Exactly.
So it is safe to assume that these women would have said anything to make sure the horrific torture stopped. It's unimaginable to comprehend the torture and pain that the accused witches would have endured to be burned for crimes they could never have committed. However, the brutal deaths are not forgotten and are still talked about in the small seaside town today. And this fitting memento mori to the North Berwick witches and remains in the grounds of St Andrew's Kirk. It's basically like a skull and crossbones, and it's to remember that death had taken place. And that death was going to take place, and it's still there in the old kirk just now. The front of the old kirk is still there, but obviously the rest is like demolished and things. But it's quite a fitting tribute to them that they have been recognised and that they are still spoke about centuries later. So it is quite good that way.
But when they went through, Vale, we're doing good though, you know, just getting on with the channel and what have you, just, you know, same as everybody else, stuck with these restrictions that are going on now. But, you know, we're just plodding away basically. Channel's doing well, so we're going to keep it going. But I'll drop you a wee mail and hopefully get you and your other half back in very soon. Did you say Skull and Crossbones, Sam?
Basically, it's like a memento mori, it's called. It's like a skull.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got like bones underneath it, like a cross.
See, you get them all dotted over all over Greyfriars, but what it means there is, I'll go back to Kirsty's Cove in a wee second. What it means in there is that it was to remind people that death, that nobody escapes death. Doesn't matter if you're stuck
That's
in life.
basically it. Aye.
You could be low class, high class, you could be a judge, a king, anybody.
It comes to you all.
Comes to everybody. If you get into Greyfriars, you see them. They're everywhere in there.
That's basically what it was. It was a reminder that it doesn't miss anybody.
Yeah. The gentleman owned this was in an affair with her maiden, got pregnant to the gentleman, but something happened. She touched the ground. The tree has changed, so no branches fall because she said when the brand falls from a family member.
Family member dies.
All right.
There's one of them down in Jedburgh. It's called the Hanging Tree. I'm from the Scottish borders, but there's one in a place called Jedburgh, and it's from the Douglas family, and that's all been pinned down as well, because they say that every time a branch breaks, that a member of the Douglas family dies. So it's all been pinned down with like big straps and things to stop it snapping.
See, it's weird how these superstitions have grown.
I don't know if you'll see that. That's like the memento mori.
I can see that. I see the skull and the
like the bones underneath it.
Shell says hi to Alison McIlvenny, but I'm not saying Alison. Hi, Alison. Because the gentleman denied their affair, she cussed them all her firstborns.
And that's the ruins. That's the ruins of the St Andrew's Kirk in North Berwick. That's where they were supposedly raised the devil and danced with him. That's where all the witchcraft was supposed to have taken place. So it's quite good. It was quite informative. I quite enjoyed researching it. So
it's amazing how much of the history is still about, but you know, these buildings and what have you.
And you would never think of it until you actually go to try and look at it and research it, and you think, I've seen that, or it's crazy.
You pass by them every day, but don't notice. It's like Kilmarnock, where the Arches is in Kilmarnock. There's a cemetery there.
Oh, is there?
Just where you see, I don't know, many times I passed that, and it's just one day I passed it and I noticed the gravestones.
That's a breast stripper.
No, it's no good at all, is it?
No. That was a breast stripper that they used to discharge them. But scary. Proper medieval, isn't it? It's
Ghostbusters, witches are recognised now. We are celebrated as power in females now. But it is true, you know, it does, again, I'll say, you know, the way women were looked upon, and it wasn't just then. I mean, you go way back to, like, say, Tudor times and all, like, say, Henry VIII.
That was a Scold bridle.
Can you imagine putting something like that on your wife or your partner these days?
I know. No, they wouldn't get away with it.
You wouldn't get away with it.
It'd be a form of abuse.
The fact that back then it was accepted just as, you know, well, the missus was nagging too much, so I'm going to put the cage on her, bang there, and we'll say, all right, okay. basically, do you know what I mean? And I think, Andy, why do you think there are not so many nights of stories about warlocks or wizards, which are reasonably pretty much the same thing as a witch? That's a good question, Andy.
Maybe because men weren't, I don't know, but maybe something to do with like the ratio between the men and male and female. The men weren't deemed to be able to do anything evil or conjure up anything. It was automatically go to the women. And
I think the other reason is because women were seen as easier targets.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because let's face it, the majority of the witch trials through the centuries, they've been, you know, most of the women have been, and they might have dabbled in herbs and what have you. And, you know, maybe there was the odd one that tried to raise demons and the devil, but the majority of the, you know, the people executed, which something in the region was 6,000 or something, were innocent people. And the main causes for accusing somebody was, as we said last night, it was for land gain or love gain, or if you fell out with a neighbour, you know, something like that. A business
to do
dispute.
with power as well, wasn't it? To do with power. It was to do with, well, I've got more power than you, so this is what's going to happen.
It's again Matthew Hopkins, the amount of women that he condemned just simply to raise his stature in the eyes of the king. That's you know, he knew he would get paid for it, but he knew the more he, you know, put the end of a rope, the better it would go in the eyes of the king.
There seems to be, like, going back to what Andy said there seems to be like one man throughout the witch trials that seems to get mentioned time and time again, which is Richie Graham. Richard Graham. He was basically deemed as the most, correct me if I'm wrong, Shelley, in chat, but he was supposed to have been the most powerful wizard. And he's got connections to the North Berwick witches. I think he's got connections to the Paisley witches as well. And he's also got connections to the Boswell family, which is in Auchinleck. He apparently raised the devil at Boswell House, on the grounds of Boswell House, and caused the late owner, Boswell, to flee the country, to actually leave, because he was up on charges for like black magic and things. But he seems to be the only man that's really mentioned throughout. Like continuous, his name's continuous throughout it.
Yeah, right. Go some comments for you all.
Prominent wizard. That's it.
I feel like you're the guest tonight. You know what? I feel like you're a guest, but you're not. There's a way of suppressing women and their voice. Don't ask me why. Just, you know.
You think I'm your guest?
Aye. There, I'll stop talking rubbish. I'll let you read the comments and answer them since, you know, it's your live and I won't shut up.
It was a way of suppressing women and their voices and power. Stupid Matthew Hopkins. He did seem to have a chip on his shoulder with women, to be fair, and I think every second woman he looked at, Forrest, was a witch, according to him. So once again, it comes back to being the unfair advantage of being a woman in that time. Thank God times have changed there.
I know. Here's a good question. I think this is a question's been out for years. One which I can't answer, Forrest, I'm afraid. You know, but she has got a point.
She has got a point, and it's one of the questions that will never be answered properly, I don't think, because it's like I don't know. It must be to do with image. I think the more notches on a bedpost that a man's got is a hero. If a woman does the same, she's whatever. But it's no different. It's no different for a man or a woman.
It might be a male ego kind of thing, maybe. I don't know. But she is bang on what she says.
Who?
I've got no idea.
It's funny how these things travel through the different generations, and it's the same things that get picked up on again and again and again. It's the same things that are maybe getting said like 40 years ago that still get said now.
Society changes, there's still certain things that never change.
Stereotypical, isn't it?
Never will change. Oh, missed that. Hold on 2 seconds. That jumped.
Back then,
Hey,
women had
Laura,
no choice but be submissive to their husbands, and if men thought them insubordinate, they punished them. That's true, Laura. If they thought that they were talking back or stepping over this line that these men had drawn, then yep, they were punished, like they said with the Scold's Bridle, or she's, even if they wanted a new girlfriend or a new wife, she's a witch, get her taken away, they can start a new life. It could be something simple as having an opinion, that you weren't even allowed to have an opinion because you were deemed as outspoken and a witch and crazy.
I mean, even going back to like the Tudor times, with like Henry VIII's court, it was obviously it was men in it with Privy Council, what have you, but there was a lot of women in it. But in Henry VIII's court, the women were only there to service the men, basically.
Aye, for his benefit.
Aye, that's all they were there for. They weren't there to for any political reasons or to get. They were just there for the sake of the men. And
he even deemed one of his own wives a witch, so that's how bad it got. He even classed Anne Boleyn as a witch because she had a deformity to her fingers, because she had 6 fingers on one hand.
Well, that's how, when Anne Boleyn was found guilty, there was 2 choices. She was either going to get burned at the stake or
have her
get
head chopped off.
And Henry chose, well, he says in his mercy that she would just be beheaded, you know. But I mean, it gives away back to Tudor times. Women just went into Henry's court and stood there and shut up. Basically, that's what they did. Here's Kirsty, a comment. Do you think all modern witches have good intentions, or do you think in modern day there's not much education in what they're getting involved in? Or on the other side, too much knowledge? You think all modern... What do you think, Sam?
I don't know. I think it... Personally, I think it's to do with your intentions. Because people set out to do well. And then... And it's a hard one because I think people know that they have knowledge, but then maybe they haven't got as much knowledge as they maybe should have, and could end up something good turning into something not so good, and could end up summoning or whatever, or trying to use like healing or whatever and end up hexing somebody or by accident or causing more damage than good. So it's hard. I do believe that witches are good, that the majority of witches are good, but I dare say that there are some witches out there that aren't there, if you know what I mean. They're just...
But I still hear the odd story of covens and what have you, do you know? Shelley's put Auchinleck House.
Yeah, that was Boswell. That was where the devil was supposed to be raised, and Boswell actually took off. He was to be tried for the crimes, and he ran away. But this is where this Richie guy was supposed to have been and raised the devil at Auchinleck House.
All right. Ghost witches have got money for everybody. He did that's buy one as well. He did the more women that he put to the stake, or you know, the noose, the more money he got.
That's it. So he's a very rich man.
He was very rich. He was very, very brutal, and you know, the way he treated people, especially women. It reminds me of George Mackenzie, you know, famous Bloody Mackenzie. He was something the same. He was a brutal, brutal man, and the more brutal he was, the more he appealed to the king at the time. This is why Mackenzie was given the job of taking care of the Covenanters, basically, to get shot at them. And Matthew Hopkins reminds me of George Mackenzie, even though they're kind of a wee bit of time apart and different occupations. But that's what he reminds me of. Just my opinion. I mean, quite harsh and quite brutal in his mannerisms and things. And I mean, I know there's some people who believe Mackenzie was a saint and he was a good man. To me, it's, you know, I've said it before, it was a load of bollocks.
Anybody that could kill that amount of people in that short space of time, and the way he killed them wasn't a nice man.
He didn't get that reputation for being, giving out Christmas presents.
Cups of tea, coming to your house to check you're all right.
Here's a bit of rye bread. Come up for a wee chat. Tracy's saying, there's a witch I have on my Facebook, Cocoa Black Amber Houston. Would have been good for her.
I'll give it a wee look up, Tracy. Thanks for that. Send me a wee private mail, Tracy, because you've got me on Facebook anyway, and I'll have a wee look at her profile and see what she's all about, if you don't mind. That would be great. Thank you.
We can certainly get, even though it's just a witch week, we can do more, we can do more stuff on witches in the future. It's not just this 1 week and then witches going about. We can do more lives on, witches, at any time. So, Tracy, if you give Sam a wee mail or, I'll let you two sort it out. I'll let you women sort it out. How's that?
Yes, right? That will do just fine.
Thank you. Shelley's saying, one lady's waiting for witchcraft for making her husband feel the pain of his wife going through
childbirth.
Right.
How did she make him feel that?
I don't know, and I don't want to know on her live in case we get a description. Do you know what I mean? I've got a rough idea, basically, how that would have worked, but it's an image that I'm not going to come out with. Shelley's saying lots of people were naive and not knowing how much their words could be their downfall. Exactly. That Shelley's bang on with that one again. Nothing to do with it. A prime example is Anne Boleyn when she turned around and said to Henry Norris, "You look for dead man's shoes." That was the start of her downfall because she was basically saying, "You're waiting till the king dies and then you want to fill his shoes."
Aye. And she was very strong-willed, Anne Boleyn, as well. I think she was the strongest out of all of Henry's wives. She was the one that was strong-willed. And to be fair, she wasn't meant to marry Henry VIII. He was supposed to marry Anne Boleyn's sister.
He had a wee...
And he had a wee tete-a-tete with Anne Boleyn in the courts.
But that's part of the reason why Anne Boleyn... the cause of conspiracy, because she was so strong-willed, the Privy Council saw Anne as a threat. After Wolsey was out the road, the Privy Council saw Anne as a threat, and so they had to get rid.
I'm laughing at Ghost Richie's comment. Very bottom.
I've not got to that one yet. Do you think the internet has developed a new breed of witches, warlocks that just snip at what goes on and heads off to a temple and tries to call up what they don't know about bringing the name of genuine? I would say the internet has developed a new breed of witches because obviously back then, maybe going back 20, 30 years, it was only in books you could probably read about it, but now all you need to do is jump on the internet and you can basically find anything you're looking for. So I think Emery is one to dabble in it, just as to jump on the internet. Whether they get the right information, who knows? That's my opinion. What do you think, Sam?
I think it's very easy nowadays to look anything up and know everything on the internet, right?
Awful.
Basically, it's like you've got your Wikipedias, you've got everything else. There's a lot of misinformation on the internet, along with a lot of information which is correct. So I think if you are looking at things like that, you need to really be sure what you're looking at is correct, because you could do yourself or somebody else some damage. Yes, I agree, some good witches, but I think there are some that think what they do is good, but is in fact a cult. I think that as well, Kirsty. I don't think that some of them do know what they're doing and they're trying to do good, but they're actually doing more harm than good. That's just a touch on what I said earlier. I've watched some programmes recently and there's been witches and things involved, and I'm like, I don't know what they're doing there. That sort of thing. So I think there's a fine line and they need to be very, very careful.
But I dare say the amount of witches there is out there, you know, with hundreds or thousands. Just take the UK, for instance. I know they're kind of worldwide. Ghost witches, you can correct me if I'm wrong, though. Because I know Ghost, she's a witch. There is the ones that rather than go for good, they go for evil. And they will, as I said, they will try to conjure up different things, evil, you know, spirits, demons, whatever. There's Laura, the old image of hat and nose cat, a witch is long gone. Your next door neighbour could be a witch and you would never know. Good or bad, but humankind now sees witches as good people that want to help.
Yep.
No, she's right. You know, if you've seen a woman walking down the road with a hat, you know, I was going to say a nose, but we just got a nose, isn't it? You know what I mean? One of the big one, you know,
the big hook nose.
A big hook nose you can hang your Tesco bag on, you know, something like that.
Somebody carry your shopping, hands are full.
Somebody carry your bucky. Know what I mean?
But it's like if somebody looks slightly odd in this day and age or dresses slightly different, then they're stereotyped as a specific thing. So somebody could just be that wee bit eccentric and that wee bit airy-fairy, whatever, and they're deemed as witchy or, oh, don't go near her, she's a witch, or who says in darkness she wears black all the time. Who says witches need to wear black all the time? They could come out in bright purple with yellow hair. You know what I mean? There's that many different interpretations of witches in this day and age.
There is. I mean, I'll give you an example. I don't know if she was a witch or no, but also I'm from Glasgow, and there used to be a woman. She used to walk. I've seen her a few times. Like she had Guile Street in Glasgow, and every bit of her face was pierced. She pierced all down here, her forehead, everywhere was pierced. And to look at her, you think, well, she's scary.
But really, really nice person.
But she's probably a really nice person, but just that image of her whole face was pierced. You know, we could give you the heebie-jeebies, basically.
And it's like the stigma that people have got lots of tattoos as well. People that are seen as having lots of tattoos are seen as thuggish. But deep down, I've got loads of tattoos. I've got like 23, 24 tattoos. I'm not a thug. Well, I don't try to be a thug. You know what I mean? It's not as if you go out, just because you've got an ink on your body or a piercing on your body doesn't mean that it changes you as a person. It just makes you that wee bit more individual as to who you are.
I mean, my driving license, I'm not going to show you. Oh my God, I'm scared of bejesus out of you. But my photo, my driving license, I look like, you know, I just came out of Barrick or something, you know, Berlin or something like that. But, you know, I know I'm one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. Isn't that right, Sam? You need to agree with me here.
Sorry, what did you say?
Listening, were you?
I was only joking. Yes, of course. Yes, good boss.
So what am I?
A good boss and very good, easy to listen to. A listener helps.
You're such a liar. You're so bad at lying, it's bad.
I can't lie.
I know, because I says I look like a thug, an ex-prisoner on my driving licence.
I thought you meant the new.
No, my licence picture. I look as if I just got out of Barrick or something.
Did you have hair?
I can't remember the last time I bought a comb. You know, if I get a show and buy a comb, people just laugh at me. Basically.
Shelley's saying she hopes your license is in date.
Shelley, I just get my new license about 2 months ago, get renewed. So I'm legal till, I don't know, 2037 or something like that. I don't know. But no, not my life. Shelley's a driving instructor, you see, so she's very proper with the driving, isn't she? You know. Left,
right?
Aye, you know. At the next junction, turn left. No, I meant right. No, I meant left. Just one way. You pick one of the two.
Just go with the flow.
Aye, just go where you want. Just follow. See that white line? Just follow that white line. See where we end up.
Shelley's got a point there as well, saying that with us being interested in like the paranormal and things, they would be condemned.
Aye.
We would have been condemned for that in back then.
Kirsty got a question. Do you think the witches you have on later on this week would
advise a specific background, education before getting involved? So what you're asking, Kirsty, is do you think that they've maybe researched what they're getting into, and if there's been any sort of... Ghost Witches would be a good person to answer this, actually. Forrest would be brilliant at answering this because she's done this.
And she's on the chat. And
she's on the chat as well. So Ghost Witches, if you don't mind answering that, because you've got more insight to that than myself, if you don't mind.
Just a bit. Andy, no, I don't have hair on my licence. It's the Iron Brew Rages. You're just jealous because they don't, they never invented Iron Brew. That's all they are. I've got to put this up. I do apologise for the language in this comment, folks. You'll take the... Bless your husband for being here. I told
Ghost Witches that I was absolutely ended at her comment because she said she would punch him in the nether regions, and I was laughing in the chat saying I'm ended.
The nether regions? What age are you? That's what my grandmother said.
I'm trying to be polite.
My grandmother, before you go outside, make sure you get a long jacket on and keep your nether regions covered in case it's cold. Stuff like that, you know what I mean? Oh, you just get kicked in the nether region. Oh, God. It is very professional. Tattoos, what you wear, forms part of your identity, but then you're not allowed to be different. The minute you're different, you're a witch. Exactly.
True, very true.
Society's got such a big problem with images. Can't have it no more. Andy's saying they have amazing girders down there as well. I think the one that's a Mayan Brew. So what do you think, Ghost Witches, to Kirsty's question? You can feel a good witch, bad witch, like you can with any other person.
You could feel a good bad witch like you can with any other person.
Just for waiting, Ghost Witches. So you see, I picked Kirsty's question up again, actually, because I've actually forgotten what it was. That's how long my memory is, Kirsty. I mean, very, very with that pen. Don't say a word, Sam. You think the witches are on later this week. Well, we've got the witches we've got on Saturday are actually Ghost Witches. We've got Jennifer, who's in our American team, and we've got Natalie from Ghost Ramblers. Natalie was on with us last year. She's coming on as well on Saturday. So we did start off with one witch. But you know, it's like these witches are everywhere. So we thought we'd add on. I know we get 3. Now, if I can find another one before Saturday, we'll have 4.
There, Ghost Witches is answered there.
Maybe I'll take that comment in 2 seconds. See, I'm not as quick as this as Sarah is, as you've probably gathered. I started out, not one there, I started out feeling my way around the dark.
I educated myself by talking to witches at every opportunity and reading up. And there's another one under that about making a book of shadows. Definitely read up to be safe and protect yourself before dabbling. It makes a huge difference.
Right. Thank you for that, Forrest. Witches, good, bitches, not
so much, no. So's figure of speech.
Is she on the Captain Spice again?
No, doubt it.
I hope she's not on the sauce again. Know what I mean? Most bitches, Shelley Smith.
Lol, aye. Mostly bitches.
You missed my last comment.
Bitches and witches everywhere, lol.
Is that the one you're talking about, Shelley? I hope she's not drinking again. Shelley, if you're drinking again, you and I are going to have a conversation tomorrow because I know the condition you were in the weekend, Missy. I mean, so you and I will have a wee tete-a-tete, as my mum used to say or something. You and I are going to have a tete-a-tete. Otherwise, in other words, you're getting it, boy. I mean, how close is Witchcraft?
Related to demonology, if anywhere? That's a good question, Andy, because King James VI deemed it as demonology, but I don't actually know how related it is. That is one for Google. For me.
Or one for Ghost Witches, or one for Saturday. We can certainly ask that as well. For you. That's no problem. So with that, I think we'll wrap that up. As I said last night, folks, our lives this week, because we're on all week, our lives are just going to be roughly about an hour. Here's one last comment from our lovely Shelley.
Witches good and bitches aren't. Scott, I could fight with you, lol. Sober as a judge I will have, you know.
Okay. Sorry, Shelley. I stand corrected. I sit corrected. All right, no. Sorry about that. That's me told, isn't it? Short and sharp. So thanks very much to Sam for doing our bits and pieces and for giving us a good live. Well, I think it was a good live. I know probably
thanks for coming in and listening to me streaming on a load of crap, but I tried, so hopefully I've kept you entertained.
Oh, you have. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope everybody in the chat has enjoyed it. So we're back tomorrow night. Well, we're not back. We got Jennifer and Matthew for our American team last night. Start again. We got Jennifer and Matthew for our American team who are on tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, and they'll be talking about the Salem witch trials, as far as I know.
Yeah.
So thanks everybody for coming in, and bang.
Sam, well done. Scott, bang average as always. Cheers for the chat, guys.
Cheers, Andy. You and I will talk another day. Don't you worry.
Thanks, Andy.
You know what I mean? Ghost Witches, one last comment for Ghost Witches. 23 years trying to perfect, but I feel confident now, a million books later. They say Ghost Witches, she's on the panel on Saturday, so feel free to ask her, whatever, within reason, obviously. So again, thanks for coming in tonight, folks, and please stay safe wherever you are. And Matthew and Jennifer will see you tomorrow night at 9 o'clock for a wee bit of the Salem witch trials. You won't see us, so you'll be glad of that. And you'll be on tomorrow night. All right, folks, thanks very much, Sam. Also, I'm keeping a hold of you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Oh, we got an angry face for somebody.
I seen that.
Did you see that?
I seen it. Here's my angry face.
I can do that, I know it. Bye, folks.
Bye.